And another thing, I'm a free man. Stop, goddamn, I'm not locked up. I'm straight. I was, but I'm back.
Trying to coddle him for. Let the man walk off, have some time to himself, sit down, soak it up, and come up with what he need to do.
You won't believe how close we came to losing King Harris and how destiny refused to let go. The hip-hop world that once went dead quiet, it's roaring again. This time, it's not a funeral march, it's a battle drum. Because after a week that felt like a lifetime, after whispers, alarms, and prayers, King Harris is alive. Not just breathing, not just surviving, fighting. It started like a day that didn't know what was coming. The halls, the gates, the fluorescent lights inside those prison walls, everything looked normal from the outside. But somewhere in that quiet, something was moving, something planned, something cold. King had been trying to keep his head clear, they said. Walking the block like a man with too much on his mind and not enough space to think, he told a couple of guys he needed air, distance, time, a reset. Minutes later, it happened. Screams cut the air like glass, boots thundered, alarms exploded, and when the noise finally fell into that terrible kind of silence, King was on the floor. Still, pale, not moving, the kind of stillness that makes your heart forget how to beat. They rushed him out wires, machines, hands moving fast. The ICU swallowed him in a storm of beeps and orders. Nurses worked like ghosts in a war zone.
A lot of people hit me up like, King, I know you tired. You ain't getting no sleep. And the truth be told, before this little I ain't been getting no sleep. You know what I'm saying? I just been outside working. Lifestyle. You know, lifestyle just lifing. You know what I'm saying? And, but now I'm damn sure not getting no sleep. This up every morning. And then around the morning time, he like to do that little live concert I be doing with him. And he like to walk around the house. So
a doctor pressed his lips together like he'd already seen the worst. And behind that glass, two parents stood shattered. T.I., the man who walked through fire before, and Tiny, the mother who would have given anything to change places with her son. People said it looked like a late-night horror you can't wake up from. They said even the walls of that hospital started to feel like a prayer. But the first detail that made blood run cold? Those wounds. They weren't random, not messy, not chaotic. Targeted, intentional. Somebody wanted him gone. Somebody made sure he got found with no camera watching. Because the cameras that see everything, blacked out. Not a frame, not a second. Like the truth itself had been shut off at the switch. T.I. showed up with eyes that had seen too much pain for one life. Tiny came in shaking, whispering his name like the sound of it alone could drag him back to the light. The doctor said the words no parent is built to hear, critical. They whispered swelling, they whispered trauma, they whispered what if. And the street heard it like thunder. Candles popped up on corners. Fans cried in parking lots. Strangers held hands like they'd known each other forever. The timeline flooded with hashtags, prayers, and questions nobody could answer. Was this bad luck or a message? Was this a fight or a hit? Then the rumor hit the wind. King had stumbled onto something he wasn't supposed to see. Contraband flowed where it shouldn't. Money changed hands where it couldn't. Deals were whispered in halls where guards were supposed to protect, not profit. If he saw that, if he tried to speak on that, in a place like that, problems don't live long. The family asked for the footage. They begged for the truth. Malfunction, the warden said. We got nothing. Not one camera, not one clip. In a building wired like a heartbeat, every lens blinked the moment the truth walked by. Too neat, too clean, too convenient. And still destiny wasn't done.
Trenches. Am I from the trenches? You gotta think.
What the hell? What you
because it's a yes or no question, y'all. Yeah, my life is difficult.
Okay, talk to me. Tell me how it's difficult.
Alright, so I was raised with my grandma.
T.I. went out to the curb, face locked in grief, and said, I don't care about justice. I just want my boy to live. The internet broke at that line. People argued what he meant. Was that surrender or a father who knew the clock was ticking and truth could wait till after breath? Then a soft voice note leaked, a nurse whispering, this wasn't random. Someone wanted him gone. It flipped the whole story on its head. Suddenly, it wasn't a brawl. It wasn't a scuffle. It was betrayal. It was silence. It was fear married to power. The next 24 hours would decide everything, the doctor said. The monitor ticked like a countdown. Tiny held his hand and cried until she couldn't cry anymore. T.I. stared through the glass, whispering, hang on, son. Daddy's here. I'm right here. And then the whispers turned to knives. A staffer's voice note blew up online. We were told to stand down. Those 4 words cracked the internet open. Stand down? Who gives that order? Why? The crowd outside grew. The vigil turned into a chorus. The city's heartbeat synced with the ICU's beeps. Justice for King, justice for King, justice for King. Somebody posted, when you play with fire, it reaches your family. Screenshots flew. Old rivalries got ripped open and pinned to the wall. People drew lines between eras, between names, between debts left unpaid. Others swore it wasn't about old beef at all. It was about what King saw behind those bars. A secret too heavy for a kid to carry, too dangerous to let him live with. The doctors spoke in that careful language that sounds like hope's shadow. They said the swelling was bad. They said the nights were long. They said they were doing everything they could. And maybe, in another story, this is where it ends, where the room goes quiet and the candles burn alone in the cold. But not this time. Because that night, when the monitors drew a thin line between here and gone, the room erupted.
T.I.'s son, King. King Harris has been arrested after not appearing in court and some other things connected.
The flat line hit, a sound that turns bones into ice, and then, clear. A jolt, a shout, a breath caught in Tiny's throat, seconds that felt like an eternity. Then a beep, one beep, another, a rhythm, faint at first, then louder, then stronger. Like a drum from somewhere far off, walking back toward the light. Tiny fell to her knees, whispering, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." T.I. looked up like he'd seen a miracle and tried not to break in half. The nurses cried quietly. The doctor held his breath and said, "We're not out of the woods, but he's fighting." By morning, the city knew. King still here, trended like an anthem. The candles burned brighter. The crowd doubled in size. People hugged strangers like they were family. For a moment, the world let out the breath it had been holding for days. But with hope came fire. Another voice note slipped through the cracks. Make it look like a fight. The target was King. It tore through the timeline like a siren. The word setup stopped being a theory and turned into a word people said with their chests. This wasn't chaos. This was choreography.
I lived with my grandma. She had a great house, but in a bad area.
That much how I manipulate the lines at the
If
test.
anybody know Terra Boulevard, Flint River,
Okay.
Clayco, that's where I'm from.
T.I. stood before the cameras, not as a rapper, not as a celebrity, as a father. They tried to break my family, he said, voice shaking, but my son's still here, and when he's ready, he'll tell you the truth. Not a threat, a vow. Days stretched like elastic. The ICU stayed a battlefield where angels wore scrubs and courage looked like a mother who refused to let go. Tiny sang when the room got too quiet. She prayed when the beeps were too slow. T.I. stopped speaking in public. He stood still and watched the clock as if staring hard enough could speed it up. And then a flicker. King's eyelids trembled. His finger moved like a feather sinking in air. Tiny gasped, clutched his hand. T.I. pressed his forehead to the glass and whispered, come back to us." A nurse leaned in and said, "King, can you hear me?" Another breath, another flicker. Eyes open halfway to the surface, weak, unfocused, but open. The room froze. Time stopped. It felt like the whole city went quiet to listen to a voice nobody could hear yet. T.I. walked in slow, touched his son's shoulder. Tiny said his name, broken and beautiful. "King?" A minute later, the doctor smiled for the first time. "He's here," he said. "He's with us." Outside, chaos turned to celebration. Balloons, flowers, murals blooming overnight on brick walls, faces tilted toward the sky. The hashtag shifted from grief to grit. Number, King survived. People cried because they could finally cry happy. They screamed because they didn't know what else to do with all that relief. But the story didn't end with a miracle. It turned into a mission. Lawyers showed up with files and questions. The family's team demanded chain of custody logs, maintenance reports for those broken cameras, duty rosters for the night of the attack. Names started circling, patterns lined up. Things that didn't make sense started to look like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. Inside the hospital, recovery wasn't pretty. It was pain and patience. It was nurses lifting, turning, whispering encouragement. It was Tiny reading psalms under her breath. It was T.I. standing outside the door at 3 a.m., praying for a world where his son could sleep without machines. It was King learning to breathe deeper, to hold a focus, to blink on command, and to squeeze hands when words wouldn't come. Days turned into a calendar no one wanted to keep, but strength builds slow, and one morning, with a voice like gravel and fire, King spoke. "Dad?" T.I. broke the kind of break that heals a man. Tiny cried like she'd been holding back an ocean. The doctor nodded and scribbled notes with a smile he didn't try to hide. King tried to say more, but the words were heavy. He swallowed, blinked against the light, and whispered it like a secret he wanted the whole world to hear. "I'm not done." The internet went nuclear. Clips of T.I. hugging his son hit every feed. Tiny's laugh, that laugh you only hear when hope finally wins, played on loop. And beneath the joy, a new current took hold. If he survived, maybe the truth would too. But survival paints a target. People who move in shadows don't like it when the light stays on. Cryptic posts resurfaced. Burned accounts came back for one-day cameos and vanished. The sins of the father fall on the son, a ghost account warned before deleting itself. Screenshots lived, threads grew teeth, comment sections turned into detectives, lawyers, and poets. Investigators pulled files that were misplaced, footage that was missing, reports that were misfiled. A tech with hands that shook confessed off the record. The cameras didn't fail. They were told to stop recording. Someone had the authority or the fear to flip that switch. Meanwhile, King fought for inches. He fought to sit up. He fought to lift his head. He fought to hold Tiny's hand longer than yesterday. He fought to look, T-I, in the eye and say, I love you. He fought to remember the last clean moment before everything went bad. Not the blood, not the floor, not the cold, the last laugh, the last promise. Every inch he won, the city cheered. Every milestone, the crowd outside the hospital grew. They kept vigil long after the candles burned down to wax ghosts. They sang when their voices cracked. They stood when their legs went numb. Because this wasn't just one family storm anymore. It was a city's demand. Then came the day nobody expected to see so soon: a wheelchair, a blanket over his knees, sunglasses shielding eyes that had seen too much light too fast. The doors parted, cameras flashed. The crowd moved like a tide and then stopped, as if afraid to breathe too loud. T.I. on the left, Tiny on the right, King between them, thinner, quieter, but undeniably here. He took the mic, hands shaking. The doctors tried to wave it off. T.I. He looked at the mic like it might be too heavy. Tiny squeezed his shoulder. King lifted his chin, and the hush that fell was the kind of quiet that rewrites a life. They tried to silence me, he said, voice rough, strong, real. But I'm still here, and I'm gonna speak. Not today, not until I'm strong enough. But when I do, you'll hear everything. The roar that followed felt like a roof ripping off the sky. People cried, people prayed, people pounded their chests like they were trying to keep their own hearts from exploding. In every clip, you can see T.I. Smile not flashy, not proud, just relieved, grateful, alive. From that moment, the world shifted. Brands called, journalists called, lawyers called, enemies listened. The story wasn't a tragedy anymore. It was a testimony. Inside the Harris home, recovery looked like life, slowing down to a pace where you can notice each breath. Tiny set up a corner with soft light and music low enough to think over. T.I. sat at the kitchen table with notebooks turned to legal pads, verses turned to statements, drives turned to evidence. Friends came by, left food, left jokes, left shoulders. But the storm outside didn't sleep. Whistleblowers started using the word nobody wants to say out loud: corruption. A guard who couldn't bear it anymore asked for a sealed room and a lawyer with a good memory. A tech described a maintenance window that didn't exist except on paper. An officer admitted he got a text to change his route for 10 minutes. 10 minutes, long enough for a life to get nearly erased. They found a camera that wasn't blacked out, one nobody thought to check. It didn't show the attack, it showed feet, shoes, a group that moved like they weren't scared of being seen. The timestamp matched the window. The names didn't, yet but the pattern did. Somewhere above someone's pay grade, a switch got thrown. And then came the moment when the story turned from survival to purpose. King sat in a sunlit chair, voice a little stronger every day. He started writing not a diss track, not a thread, not a post, a statement, a record, not for clout, for clarity. He described what he saw in those halls, the whispers, the deals, the eyes that slid away when he asked too many questions. The night someone told him, keep your head down if you want to keep it. He didn't, and that's why we're here. The first interview wasn't a spectacle. It was a room with just enough light, just enough truth, and a kid who almost didn't get to be a man. He spoke softly, like every word was a weight he could finally put down. He didn't name names, not yet. He named patterns. I wasn't special, he said. I was just in the way. The reaction was seismic. Some called it brave. Some called it reckless. Some said, about time. Others said, watch your back. But you could feel it, a system flinching because the silence it counted on had turned into a voice with millions behind it. The nights got loud in the city. Rallies spread from 1 block to 5, from one neighborhood to 6. Chants cut through the air with new words. We see you. We hear you. We're not afraid. Lawyers filed motions like drum beats. Journalists held up requests that had been ignored for years. Politicians showed up in press suits and careful statements, suddenly discovering a conscience under the camera lights. Meanwhile, King kept getting stronger. He walked the hall by himself the first time, and the doctor clapped like it was a graduation. He laughed at a joke that wasn't even that funny, and Tiny laughed just because he did. He ate a real meal, not the kind served with a clock ticking. He listened to music, not loud, not yet, but enough to remember who he was before the wires. And when he was ready, he wrote 7 words on a note and slid it across the table to T.I. I want to speak in the open. The venue sold out in minutes, not because people wanted a show, because they wanted a promise. The stage was simple: a chair, a mic, a family standing a step behind. No pyrotechnics, no intro track, just a young man who took a breath and told the truth about what it cost to stumble into the dark and walk back out. He didn't give the internet the spectacle it wanted. He gave the city the map it needed. If it can happen to me, he said, think about who doesn't have cameras waiting outside. The room went still. Not quiet still. Like every person realized they were part of the next chapter, whether they liked it or not. The final turn came not with a bang, but with paperwork, indictments, suspensions, reassignments that looked like promotions until you read the lines. The malfunction got a name. The stand down got a signature. The ghost account disappeared for good. The enemies with cryptic posts went silent. The ones with open beef remembered they had families too. But don't get it twisted, the story isn't squeaky clean. Power never gives up without pulling a few wires on its way out. There were threats disguised as advice. There were friends who suddenly had to be waved off at the door. There were nights T.I. slept with his shoes on and the lights low. There were mornings Tiny opened the curtains and whispered, "New day, new mercy." And there was King, not a martyr, not an angel, a survivor, a kid who bled but didn't fold, a son who scared death enough to make it back to breakfast. A voice that started as a tremble and turned into a bell. He told the crowd what nobody expected. I forgive, but I don't forget. Forgiveness is for me. Memory is for justice. The words cracked something open, not just in the city, but in people who'd been holding their own storms in silence for years. Letters started arriving with stories nobody had asked to hear before. Kings without crowns, queens without microphones, people who could finally say, "Me too." That night, the skyline glowed like it had something to celebrate. Murals of King looked less like memorials and more like mirrors. The chant changed for the last time. You can't kill a king. Not the body, the idea. Not the voice, the echo. As the sun rose over Atlanta, the hospital that once felt like a waiting room for grief stood behind them like a landmark on a road they thought might end there. The beeping that once sounded like the edge of a cliff faded into memory. The city that cried, raged, prayed, and sang it still does all of that, but now it does it with a smile it earned the hard way. T.I. stood beside his son on a quiet morning without cameras, without noise, and said the thing he had been saving for when words didn't hurt. You didn't just live, son. You taught the whole world how to. Tiny kissed his forehead and whispered what she'd whispered 1,000 times into sterile rooms and sleepless nights. You're strong, baby. Come back. And he did. He came all the way back. So here's where we leave it, not with funeral flowers and unanswered questions, but with a door kicked open and light pouring in. This wasn't just a fight. It wasn't just a setup. It wasn't just a miracle. It was all of it. It was a map through the dark. It was proof that sometimes the truth needs a heartbeat to carry it. King Harris alive, healing, speaking. And somewhere out there, the silence that used to own the night is finally scared of the morning. You won't believe it until you feel it, but even in the darkest rooms, hope keeps a spare key. And when destiny refuses to let go, the story doesn't end with tears. It ends with a promise. This is not the end. This is chapter 1. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share because this time, the story isn't about losing a voice. It's about all of us finding ours.